صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم را. تلك آيات الكتاب والذي أنزل إليك من ربك الحق ولكن أكثر الناس لا يؤمنون. الله الذي رفع السماوات بغير عمد ترونها ثم استوى على العرش وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى يدبر الأمر يفصل الآيات لعلكم بلقاء ربكم توقنون. وهو الذي مد الأرض وجعلها فيها رواسي وأنهارا ومن كل الثمرات جعل فيها زوجين اثنين يغشي الليل النهار إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. وفي الأرض قطع متجاورات وجنات من أعناب وزرع ونخيل صنوان وغير صنوان يسقى بماء واحد ونخيل صنوان وغير صنوان يسقى بماء واحد ونفضل بعضها على بعض في الأكل إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعقلون. وإن تعجب فعجب قولهم أإذا كنا ترابا أإنا لفي خلق جديد أولئك الذين كفروا بربهم وأولئك الأغلال في أعناقهم وأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة الفاتحة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I start the announcements, if I could ask everyone to take a few steps forward, please, so we can ensure the crowd coming in can maximize the space at the back of the hall. Monday, 6th February 2023, Eve of 15th Rajab 1444. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Marhum Najib Muhammad Razak Bujwala of London passed away on Saturday and will be buried tomorrow on Tuesday, the 7th of February. Salatul Mayyit will be prayed after Salatul Dhuhrain, and the burial will be thereafter at Carpenter's Park Cemetery at 2:30 p.m. Please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhum and Kul Marhameen. Al-Fatiha. Tuesday, 7th of February is the Shahadat day of Bibi Zaynab, salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ladies' morning majlis will start at 10 a.m. with Quran, majlis by Zakira Al-Banin Mirali, and will end with Amal of Dawood by Zakira Al-Banin Mirali. Thursday, 9th of February, Jumeirah program will start at 8 p.m. with Surah Yasin and majlis by Sheikh Anwar Jafar. The ladies' Yad team presents Jasht Maulud to celebrate the Khushalis of the Holy Household alayhim as-salam on Thursday, the 16th of March. This will be in parallel to the main program. YDD are now enrolling boys and girls aged 5 years to 14 for recitation of the 3 short du'as and du'a iftitah in Shahr Ramadan. To register for auditions, please email ydd@hujjat.org. The burial fund team have sent emails where available with renewal information for 2023. Please check your inbox as well as the junk and spam folders. Those that have asked for postal renewals, these have also been posted out. And if you haven't received the renewal, please get in touch with the team by emailing bf@hujjat.org. The Hujjat membership subscription for the year 2023 is now due. You can pay either online or at the treasurer's desk at the back. Please ensure your subscriptions are up to date to ensure full access for all Hujjat services from January to December 2023. The utility prices are extremely high. Please support the center by donating towards the general fund. And finally, the calendars for 2023 can be purchased for £1 at the treasurer's desk. Please recite 5 times Amma Yujibul for the following: Mukhtar Ghulam Hussain Hasham, who is in critical condition in Arusha; Zara Megji, who is in critical condition in Dar es Salaam; and for all those who are unwell. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. We will now have Marthia, followed by Majlis by Maulana Ali Abbas Razawi. Please recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، میں وارث تطہیر ہوں، میں وارث تطہیر ہوں، ناموس نبی ہوں، اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں۔ چاہو تو جلا سکتی ہوں خطبوں سے میں تم کو، صابر کی بہن ہوں جو میں، صابر کی بہن ہوں جو میں خاموش کھڑی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی، افسوس کنیزی میں اسے مانگ رہے ہو، تم جس کے غلاموں کی غلامی میں رہے ہو، یہ ظلم نہ ہوگا کبھی، میں زندہ بھی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، تم اپنے پیغمبر کو اگر دیکھنا چاہو، نیزے پہ جو یہ سر ہے اسے غور سے دیکھو، ہم شکل پیغمبر ہے یہ، میں اس کی پھوپھی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، اے شام کے لوگوں میں زہرا کو بھی دربار میں تم نے تھا بلایا، دربار میں بھی ہوں مگر فرق ہے اتنا، پردے میں تھی وہ اور میں بے پردہ کھڑی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صدق الله العلي العظيم. Only 2 nights after we celebrated the Walad of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we're gathered here tonight to commemorate his daughter. There's a strange link between this father and this daughter. The only person who broke the back of Amir al-Mu'mineen after the death of Zahra was when Zaynab cried. And tonight we're here to commemorate and to remember that person who, because of her Islam, is where it is today. The entire message of Sayyid al-Shahadat is encapsulated in her life. And if we're Shia today, it's actually because of that lady. This is why you'll notice that this particular faith is really based on 3 women. More than the men, the survival of this religion has been based on 3 women. And that shows you the entire dynamics of Ahlul Bayt is such that both men and women are engaged in this journey. The Prophet himself says, in fact there's a hadith that on the day when Sayyidah Zaynab was born, the Prophet comes to his mosque and he calls all of his companions. And he says, know that today a daughter has been born into my household. Respect her, know her. Because she's the same as Khadija was to me. Now what does that mean? In the same way that Khadija sacrificed everything that she had for the preservation of Islam, and Fatima sacrificed everything she had, Sayyidah Zaynab sacrifices everything that she had for the baqa of Islam. Imam Hussein's entire message would have been wiped out had it not been for his sister. So therefore the position of Sayyidah Zaynab is nothing less than Imam Hussein in this message. And this is why you've heard time and time again from this member that Sayyidah Zaynab is who? Sharikatul Hussein. So look, today as we're gathered here, just remember this. Coming to the majlis of Imam Hussein in and of itself is nothing less than ziyar of Sayyid al-Shahadat. If only you understood it. In the same way that your maqam is elevated when you go into the haram of the Imam, similarly when you come to the majlis of Imam Hussein, your maqam is elevated. Difference is this though, look, many people come to the majlis. Why? There are 2 names of Allah that govern this entire majalis and ziyarat. One name is Ar-Rahman, a universal for 8 billion people. All of these people who are dragged in and all of those people who go to ziyarah, and people say, well, we weren't invited. No, everybody's invited. There's no such thing as you weren't invited. There's an open invitation from the time Imam Hussein said, Hal min Nasir. From that day onwards, each one of you have been invited. Is the will to whether you go or not, purity of your heart, that either stops you from going or takes you to go. Because look, if it just comes to the fact that have you been invited, there are people over there committing sins, but they're still invited. The people are not Muslim, but they're still invited. So Imam Hussein's given you an open invitation, everybody go. And people still get there, but the question is, do they utilize it or not? So this is where the name of Allah, Ar-Rahim, Rahimi of Allah takes over. Many people are invited, only some people utilize it. How do you know that your ziyarah has been accepted? And how do you know your majlis has been accepted? Is the minute that you get up from here and you walk out and you feel the change inside of yourself. If you feel something has changed inside of you, know that your majlis is accepted. And if you're the same as you came in, then know that there's a problem there. The purpose of Imam Hussein's majlis is not for him, is to change you. It's for you to come closer to the Imam so that when you leave here, you feel that light of the Imam. In the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, is that, look, you can't understand Allah. Ma'rifati min nuraniya ma'rifatullah azza wa jalla. If you understand the nur of Amir al-Mu'mineen, then you understand the nur of Allah. If you come to understand the nur of Imam Hussein, then you come to understand the nur of Allah. If you come to understand the nur of Sayyidah Zaynab, only then can you understand Allah. This is why time and time again we come here. The attempt is this, that our heart connects. It's not words that are going to change you, believe me. It's your heart that's going to change you. Can this go to there? Well, look, ziyarah of Imam Hussein is like doing ziyarah above the arsh of Allah. Meaning what? Without a hijab going directly towards the Dhat of Allah. But how many of us can do that? It means this, not this. Sometimes this becomes a hijab. This is what's required. The mind itself becomes a hijab on certain levels. It's the heart that takes you forward. Why? Because the heart takes you to hudur, takes you to presence. The mind doesn't take you to presence. In the words of those people who studied logic, you'll know. Husuli ilm is from the mind. I've been told to translate. Husuli basically is knowledge knowledge via a medium. Your five senses, for example, your mind from the outside world takes you to come to understand, to come to know. Huduri is from the heart. You don't need anything from the outside. Presence means you're hadir in that particular knowledge. It's like Allah. Your knowledge of Allah needs to be huduri, needs to be presence. Not just theologizing or philosophizing. But look, without going into a technical discussion, this is why we come. Sayyida Shahadat, Sayyida Zaynab need to be understood. The biggest lesson she teaches us is this. She was majzoob in Imam Hussein. There's a jazb into Imam Hussein. She was annihilated, her entire essence was annihilated in Imama. And that's why I recited this verse at the beginning. That look, when the Prophet of God is leaving this world, Allah says, Qul, say to them, that I don't want any ajr, illa al-mawaddata fil qurba. Other than you have mawadda for my loved ones. From the very beginning of time, Allah's biggest test for humanity has always been waliullah. Look and see. What was Adam? Adam had nothing until Allah didn't blow his soul into Adam. The minute Allah blew his soul, all the angels are told to bow. Not all the angels, bar some angels, all of the angels are told to bow. So the angels go and bow. What does bowing mean? Angels physically can't bow. They're not physical. They're immaterial. So what does it mean for angels to bow? Angels to bow means submission to the will of Insan Kamil. Each one of you has to bow to Adam. And if you don't bow to Adam, then what are you? فَإِنُّهُ رَجِيمٌ. You're shaitan. Your essence is that of shaitans. If you don't bow to Adam. What is Adam? Adam is waliullah. The entire test for all of humanity from the beginning of time has been waliullah. Adam was the test for who? Angels and shaitan. Who lost the test? Shaitan lost. Though hukum, if you look, according to some of our ulama, hukum to bow wasn't for shaitan, was for the angel. Shaitan was a jinn. But shaitan lost the trial and tribulation test. Insani Kamil to who? He was arrogant. In the same way, for every generation has been tested with Insani Kamil, waliullah. The waliullah of our time, or at least in the time of the Prophet, yes, Prophet was waliullah, but the test wasn't the Prophet, the test was Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is why you'll see, in the same way like Satan was living with the angels for how many years? One hadith of the 7,000, whether it was heavenly or earthly, we don't know. The minute waliullah comes, separation takes place. This is why Ali is the one who does what? Taqseem of what? Jannah wa nar. Heaven and hell. Ali is the one who divides. So the biggest test for all of the Muslims in those days was what? Amir al-Mu'mineen. Divided. Either you go to heaven, you go to hell. Sayyida Zaynab and all of Ahlul Bayt teach you one lesson. How to be annihilated, fani within the Dhat of the Imam. And this is why Sayyida Zaynab was and did have isma. Maybe not at the level of Ahlul Bayt, but she had isma. Why? Remember this. Allah doesn't directly purify any of the prophets. And the Quran says, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهِ. Allah's irada was to only purify Ahlul Bayt. The overflow of Ahlul Bayt is what purified all the other prophets. Haqiqat Muhammadi was pure. Overflow from that, with complete responsibility. I say this. Complete responsibility. You speak, next time you go to Quran, ask Ayat Allah Khurasan, I'll tell you. Allah only purified one haqiqah. The wasil of that haqiqah purified everything else. If Adam is tahir, is because of the wasil of the Prophet. And if Nuh is tahir, is because of the wasil of the Prophet. Ibrahim is tahir, is because of the wasil of the Prophet. Allah's Surah Adhab tells you, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلُ الْبَيْتِ. Ahlul Bayt is the only thing that's purified. Allah directly purifies them. Their overflow purifies everything else. How is it possible then somebody growing in the house of Zahra is not purified? No, that's the weakest istidlal. Now let's go to the... Look, Sayyidah Zaynab is born, comes into this world. Zahra comes to her, kisses her, comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Question is asked, what are we going to name her? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, he says, this name your father is going to give. Rasulullah will give. Say Rasulullah walks in, sits down, Jibreel comes down. As Jibreel comes down, he says, Allah has chosen her name. What's her name? Zaynab. Zinatul Ab, right? Now you've heard this, beauty of her father. But actually if you go to our ulama and see, it's not just beauty of her father. Abawain, Walidain, basically both of them. She's the beauty of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Zahra alayhi salam. Right? So it's not just father. Here, that father, Abawain, basically means mother and father here. She's the beauty of her mother, she's the beauty of her father. Who's saying this? Allah is saying this. You've heard it, but you haven't digested it. Shall I tell you why? Look who her father is. Is her father not the greatest man in creation? Isn't her mother the greatest woman in creation? So how can Zaynab be Zaynab then? For her to be Zaynab means she has to be at a level which is competing with both of them. And Allah is saying that name her Zaynab. Look at this. Who's Amir al-Mu'mineen? Ali is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imam al-Muttaqeen, right? Asadullah al-Ghalib. What does that mean? When they say Ghalib ala kulli ghalib, what does that mean? In every single maratib wujud, Amir al-Mu'mineen is Ghalib. Amir al-Mu'mineen is that person who's gone into the fire of Allah, lost his qualities and come out with lillahi qualities. That's Amir al-Mu'mineen. Look, take a piece of iron. Iron. What is it? Black. Hard, cold. Put it in fire. What happens? Immediately loses its color. All of a sudden becomes soft. Takes the properties of fire. Ali goes into the fire of Allah as a bashar, comes out manifesting Allah. That is Ali ibn Abi Talib. Who's Zaynab? Zaynab, Zinatul Ab. Who's Fatima alayhi salam? Ismatullah al-Kubra, Sirrullah, Hujjatullahi ala al-Hujjaj. Who's her daughter? Zaynab. We haven't understood Zaynab. Who names her Zaynab then? The neighbor? No. Allah names her Zaynab. So therefore she has a beauty about her that beautifies Amir al-Mu'mineen and beautifies Zahra. If one is Aql Kul and the other one is Nafs Kul, one of them is Sirrullah, the other one is Nafsullah, one of them is Ruhullah, the other one is Qalbullah, the Muz Zaynab. We haven't understood her. Next question then. How is it possible Zaynab has Isma? Well, let's go through it. Haven't there been other children of prophets who left the path? Nuh, son, one of them, and others as well. Yeah, fine, maybe. But just remember, there are multiple different factors that affect a child. Nuh may have been a prophet. His wife's family. Lut may have been a prophet. His wife's family. Now look at Zaynab and see. See, najasat has to come from somewhere to affect the child. Najasat has to come from some direction. Now look at this. Who's Amir al-Mu'mineen? Right? Who's Amir al-Mu'mineen's father? Abu Talib. Who's his mother? The entire Kaaba breaks open for his mother. Right? Who's Zaynab's mother? Ismatullah al-Kubra. Zaynab's grandfather? Insan Kamil. Zaynab's grandmother, Khadija. Zaynab's brother, Hassan. The other brother, Hussein. Where in this do you find any najasa? So therefore, if they have Isma al-Kubra, then Zaynab also has Isma al-Sughra. There's no tradition to say she ever sinned. And remember this as well. Sinning is of different levels. One sin, physical sins that you do. Next sin, sins of the mind. Next sin, sins of the heart. And then after that, every single maratib, Hadith al-Haqiqah outlines 3 stages. If you go see, what does Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen say to Kumail? Look and see how he takes Kumail when he comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. What's he asking? He's not asking for the description of Haqiqah. If you want to know, in one word we can tell him, Wujud mutlaq bidun qayd, Wujud ahadi. That's Haqiqah. He's not asking for that. He's saying, Ali, you've got to that level, take me to that level as well. Ali sahib walayat mutlaqa. Kumail is saying, actually take me to that level. And he's not asking, give me a description of what Haqiqah is. Within a word, it could be described. No. He's trying, what he wants is, he wants to get to that level. And what does Amir al-Mu'mineen say? When he says, Al-Haqiqah, he says, what is Haqiqah? He says, what have you got to do with Haqiqah? Awalastu sahib as-sirrik? Am I not your sahib as-sir? He says, you are. But isn't it enough for you that our sprinkles touch you? As in now and again I give you short nuggets of what Haqiqah is. But what does he say though? He says, but how is it possible a questioner comes to somebody like you and you don't tell us? So what does the Imam do then? He says, fine. And look, 3 times he says, Zidni bayan, Zidni. We had time, I'd go into Hadith al-Haqiqah. We don't have time, otherwise we could spend the next 10 hours talking about it easily. And inshallah one day maybe an ashra. But look, what does he do? 3 levels he takes them up from. People say it can't be explained. No, it can be explained. Let's sit down, let's discuss it. What is Amir al-Mu'mineen? Maho. First, this is his terms now. Maho and then saho. Destroys Kumail completely, all of his characteristics. That's Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Kumail, as long as you're Kumail, you're not going to get to where I've seen. The kingdom that I've seen of Allah, you're not going to get to that as long as you're Kumail. You're at the maqam of qalb, tawheed, you see individuals. You need to see Allah only now. Destroys him, removes all of his characteristics. Then what does he do? Rebuilds them again in 3 stages until that stage comes where he says, now quieten the lamp because the dawn has come. What is he saying? He says, quieten your mind now because the heart is taken over. You've got to. More tell me. He says, no, that's enough for you now. Done, dusted and gone. Right? Big injustice to this hadith because I've only taken 7 minutes to try and explain it. Maybe in the future, if we have time, we'll go into it. It's a very beautiful tradition though. Hadith Haqiqah of Amir al-Mu'mineen when he has a conversation with Kumail. Coming back though, if Kumail is like that, then what's Zaynab like? Because me and you haven't understood. Now let's go back. Time is ever ticking. We've got 30 minutes to wrap up. A topic which is an ocean. To touch Sayyidah Zaynab, if I understood Zaynab even a fraction, imagine that. Look, we haven't understood Abbas, let alone Zaynab. Who's more afdal, right? Look at it. Zaynab is the daughter of Zahra. Abbas is still the son of al-Baneen. What did al-Baneen say to Abbas? She says, don't ever compare yourself to them. Their mother is Zahra. Says, Abbas, you may be the son of Ali, but they're the daughters of Zahra. And if ever you want to know a mother and how she teaches a son, look at al-Baneen. You know, we go into depth of philosophy and this, that. No, she teaches Abbas in a very simple way. Abbas is small. She says, Abbas, you know who that is? It's Hussein. Deen is there. Quran is there. Will of Allah is there. If he sits, you sit. If he stands, you stand. All of deen is that. That's how you teach a small boy. So what does Abbas do? Running after Hussein. Hussein sits, he sits. Hussein stands up, he stands up. What is she trying to teach? At-ta'at of the Imam. Imam has to be ma'soom then. Imam has to be waliullah. Imam has to be at that level. Blindly, she says, go. Whatever he does, it doesn't matter. We don't need to teach any more than that. Tawheed is with Hussein. Nabuwa is with Hussein. Imam is with Hussein. Jannah is with Hussein. So what does she do? Look at Hussein. Right? But what does Amir al-Mu'mineen do? To train Abbas, what does he do? He gives Abbas to Zaynab. And that day comes when he walks in through the door. What does he see? He smiles and he says, today my daughters are helping my son walk. In the Sahan they were training Abbas to walk. So what does Zaynab turn around and says, father, no, we're learning to walk under the shadow of Abbas. Right? That's love between his brothers and sister there. We haven't understood. In the words of the sixth Imam, if my uncle Abbas was to look at a person, he'd make him into Kumail. You come and ask me who is greater, Abbas or Kumail? When an Imam praises a person, 4 Imams have praised Abbas. 4 Imams. These are people who are Sahib-e-Wilaya, people who are representing the Prophet. They don't praise people. 4 Imams have praised Abbas. And every single Imam has praised Sayyidah Zaynab. Every single Imam. Zaynab's maqam, we can't understand. Maybe she wasn't at the level of Amir al-Mu'mineen's Isma. But they're the source. And she's burning in the source. As I said, when Ali was put into the molten fire of Allah's Dhat, he came out manifesting Allah. When Zaynab was put into that molten fire of Hussein, everything, in the words of our ulama, there were 5 characteristics Zaynab had. She had the aql and the ma'rif of Rasulullah. And she had the shuja' of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And she had the sabr of Hassan. And she had the izzah of Hussein. This is why they say that when Zaynab was walking, it was as if all of Ali Abba was walking. That's what symbolizes Sayyidah Zaynab. Look, that's what you're here for. Understand Ahlul Bayt. It may be a wasila to get to Hussein. Hussein is lofty. We haven't understood Habib ibn Mawahir. Hussein is lofty. You want to get to Hussein? We can't, not in this lifetime, so you've got to get through wasilas. This is why when people say, can you really get anywhere without a wasila? You start off with Sayyid, and this is why they say if there's a place where your du'as are answered fastest, is when you go to the grave of Sayyidah Zaynab. Right? Even faster than anywhere else. Why is that? Because Ahlul Bayt hold holy Sayyidah. I still remember 10 years ago or so, there was a Sunni friend of mine. He decided to go to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So I said, look, son, if you are there, take a detour from Cairo as well. Because Ayatollah Bahjat would say the actual grave of Sayyidah Zaynab is in Cairo. So according to him it was. So anyway, I said, look, you go to Cairo and just see. Just go and give my salam and see what happens. His wife was a bit of a Wahhabi at that time, you know. He goes, look, if I go, she's going to kill me. I said, anyway, just take a detour from Cairo and see what happens. He says, not me. Her entire worldview changed. He says that they both, because in Cairo it's not men and women, so they both went inside. 45 minutes later, she's not moving. He's saying, look, we've got to get back. She's saying, I've never felt so much peace. That which I asked for, this lady has given me. Try going. If you can understand who Zaynab, if you can understand who Ahlul Bayt are, then maybe when you go to Hussein, you'll see a different change. Look, if I was to put it in layman terms, each one of these are vitamins which are required for you to build your body strong. Here, build your soul strong, build ma'rifah. And remember, ma'rifah is connected with ishq. The name of Hussein and Zaynab come, tears are meant to come into our eyes. You know why? Because tears are the only thing that you have in the kingdom and the domain of Allah. On Thursday, you're going to everyone recites say, Wasila'uhul baqa, Wasila'uhul baqa. Where does baqa begin from? It begins from tears. Tears need to be there. Tears connect you. This is why they say there's certain people that come to the majlis of Imam Hussein. Ulama, our great ulama would say. They say some people come to the majlis of Imam Hussein where Hussein ibn Ali himself puts the hand on their head. His hand is on their head. How do you recognize them? They sit there waiting for the name Hussein to be mentioned. When it's mentioned, you see tears coming out of their eyes. Imam Hussein puts his hand on all of your heads on the day of Ashura. You say Bismillah, everybody starts crying. But there are people who on a daily basis, Imam Hussein puts their hand on their head. And this is why if you look at somebody like Sheikh Mujtaba Qazwini, who was the teacher of Ayatollah Sistani, the great Arif mystic of his time, somebody asked him, he says, how did you come to see Imam al-Zaman? He said, the way I came to see is I saw one night the Prophet in my dream. He said to me, if you want to see my son, the Mahdi, cry in the morning and cry in the evening for Hussein. He said, for 2 years I cried. 2 years later I saw my Imam. It was the most Nurani moment of his life, he says. Where's the dhikr? Where's the Quran? No, connection with Imam Hussein. Why? Because if you're connected to Imam Hussein, then naturally you come to the Quran. Naturally you come to remembrance and dhikr. Naturally you come to goodness. Hussein is that. Look, now that we're on this, let me mention to you one thing. In the 70s, there was a marja by the name of Sayyid Ahmad Khansari. Sayyid Ahmad Khansari was marja Allah in his time. Many people did his taqleed. Many people did his taqleed. People would say that if you want to see a person who's never committed a sin, look at Ahmad Khansari. So one day this guy used to take caravans to Iraq and Iran. In fact, one of the guys came up to him and said to him, look, you know, my brother is not very religious. You know, he does all the haram things. Could you give him some nasiyah? Could you give him some advice? Just give him some advice so that he can come to the deen. Ayatollah Ahmad Khansari says, listen, have you tried? He says, yes. Are you married? He says, yes. If you could recite a salawat and come forward, please. As far forward, some of the brothers are finding it difficult to walk in. Ahmad Khansari says, look, you know, if you've tried, what do you expect me to do? Right? There's no magic potion that I'm going to say something to him and he's going to all of a sudden come towards Islam. He says, oh, you're the marja of the time, come on. You've got to give me a solution. So Ahmad Khansari looks down like this. Then he looks up, he says, yes, there's a solution. He says, what is it? He says, if you can take him to Hussein, then I'll give him a nasiyah. Then I'll give him an advice. He says, Agha, this guy doesn't even want to go to Shah Abdul Azim. You want us to take him to Iraq? He says, go somehow do a family holiday over there and just get him over there. He says, that's your headache now. So this man says, he says, somehow we convinced him to come on this family holiday. So they were there for a number of days. So as you know, just like some of us, the first thing he does is he goes to the shops, buying rings and sweets and everything else, whatever it was in the 70s in those days. The last day comes. The brother comes, he says, look, you know, you've come to Karbala, you haven't gone to the shrine of Imam Hussein. He says, what have I got to do in the shrine of Imam? Look at me, what am I going to go there for? I was here on a holiday, I've had my holiday. He says, just come. Grabbed him by the hand and took him. In those days, Bain al-Haramain wasn't Bain al-Haramain. There were shops in there, there were trees in there, there were even houses in there. So they go through Bain al-Haramain, cut all the way through. He said, okay, fine, you don't need to go to Abbas. Let's just go direct to Imam Hussein. Takes him directly to Imam Hussein, right? And in those days, there was no covering. When you walk into Imam Hussein, now you've got that covering there. That used to be a sahan before. And then straight away, you had the entrance to Imam Hussein. So they go in there and he's looking around everywhere and there's no movement with him in his heart. Eventually he comes to the door of Imam Hussein. His brother says, I just saw his head drop. He said, we walked in. He said, my brother started to bend and he went all the way up to the zari. When he grabbed it, he started to cry. And his crying increased. So he said, I went up to him and I said, brother, now that you're next to Hussein, at least make a promise that you won't do what you do. He comes back to Tehran. He says, I went to Ayatollah Khansari. I said, I took my brother to ziyarah. He says, bring him. He says, I don't need to bring him anymore. Hussein ibn Ali is taking care of him. The biggest message is this. Look, today when people say, our children are leaving the way of Ahlul Bayt, they're not praying, they're not fasting, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. Look, these are times of valal and ulamat. Even if you lectured them for 300 days, it doesn't change the heart. The only thing that changes the heart is Hussein ibn Ali. Right? Now link it back again and understand Sayyidah Zaynab. If today you're gathered here for a reason, Allah doesn't bring you here for the purpose of just bringing you here. If you've come here, He wants to give you something. And they say that crying for Zaynab is like crying for all of the five. Not just one. The thawab of crying for Sayyidah Zaynab is as if you've cried for Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen and Zahra and Hassan and Musa, all of them. So there's a significance in this. So now that you're in the right hal. Hal is important. That state of being needs to be there, otherwise you won't benefit. When one comes into the majlis, you won't benefit. You can now make that connection. Look, where did we start then? Where have we got to? Just the introduction is gone, and I've got 19 minutes. They said that when after Zaynab was born, she started to cry. Rasulullah held her and she was still crying. There was a reason for her crying. Rasulullah knew there's a reason as well. Amir al-Mu'mineen knew there's a reason as well. Until a very small boy comes running and he held on to his sister and his sister began to smile. You know what they would say in that family? They would say that we don't want to see that day when Zaynab and Hussein are separated. You know when the biggest test came? When Zaynab was to be married to Abdullah bin Ja'far. You see, you know what Zaynab symbolizes? Look, you can't even recite the life of Sayyidah Zaynab without crying. You know why? Masa'ib. Zaynab to Amir al-Mu'mineen was like, look, some of you elders here have daughters. You know that even if you were to come home late, it's not your wife who calls you, it's your daughter who makes sure you're okay. Your relationship with your daughter is second to none. You don't have the same emotional attachment to your sons as you have to your daughter. And you know as fathers the most painful moment for you is the day your daughter gets married and leaves you. Amir al-Mu'mineen, if you look at it and see his heart, in your own life, if your daughter ever has an issue, she doesn't call her husband first. If her father's alive, she'll call her father. You've seen that. Look at Amir al-Mu'mineen then. After Zahra, Zaynab became Zahra to the family. What makes Imam cry? On 2 or 3 occasions he cried, but that was only because of his daughter. One time was this. In the olden days in the Hijazi culture, the mother would take the daughter by the hand and take her to the house of her husband. They say the day when Zaynab was married, one Imam was standing behind with tears in his eyes, because his daughter was standing there without a mother. It was Hassan and Hussein who then took. Look at the words which are communicated between brother and sister. Zaynab, before leaving her house, comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen first, sits her father down, kisses his hands, and just says one thing. Father, if in my time in your house I've ever wronged you, for the haqq of my mother Zahra, forgive me. What can a father do in that situation? Amir al-Mu'mineen started to cry. Then after that, what does she do? Then she comes to Hussein. She looks at her brother and she just says one thing. She says, brother, without you I can't live. Now and again come and see me, please. Now and again come and see me, please. You know what, Amir al-Mu'mineen, there's a tradition by the next day, Imam, when he walks into the house, you know what he hears? He hears Hussein was sitting in a room crying. He says, Hussein, son, why do you cry for? He says, because I miss my Zaynab. He says, then go and see her. Like a child runs, Hussein ran to the house of Abdullah bin Ja'far. You know what Fidda? Fidda moved in with Zaynab, by the way. So she didn't stay, she went with Zaynab. When Fidda opened the door, she says, Hussein, come in. What does he see? He sees a sister was sitting there, hair open. Allah, I haven't seen my Hussein all day. Could you imagine that love? Look, we haven't even begun to talk about Karbala yet. Look, imagine the pain. You can feel that pain because you can feel Hussein. You can feel Zaynab. Brother and sister, you can feel that pain. Who was Abdullah bin Ja'far? Look, just 2 words on. He's the son of Ja'far at-Tayyar. Who praises Ja'far at-Tayyar? Allah Himself does. Ja'far at-Tayyar is that person who converts Najashi. At the janaz of Najashi, they say Rasulullah does Tayyul Ard comes all the way to Ethiopia to recite his janazah. Imagine Abdullah bin Ja'far then. In the words of Ayatollah Behçet, whenever there was a problem, he would always say, go and recite the Salah of Ja'far at-Tayyar. Right? For any issue that you had. Many a time he would say that of the dua. So many people come and say, well, it didn't work. The reason why is because the dua that Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi mentioned after Salah of Ja'far at-Tayyar is not the correct one. Ayatollah Behçet would say, go to Zad al-Ma'ad, that dua is the correct one. And then if you go into sajda and if 2 tears come out of your eyes, then know that your dua has been accepted. Many a time people have done this, many a time, in particular when a mother prays for her son or daughter to get married, every time it works. Tears need to come in sajda. That mother needs to cry for the sake of their children. But anyhow, this is, the topic today is not to do with dua and dhikr and wird. But that's Ja'far at-Tayyar, right? So now imagine his son, Abdullah. You know, there's a, Ayatollah said Ali Kashmiri narrates something. I've not read it myself, I've only heard it from him. The nephew of Ayatollah Abdul Karim Kashmiri. He says something strange about Sayyidah Zaynab. It shakes you when, there's 3 things he says. 1 thing I can't repeat, because you won't be able to take, but 2 things. One of those was this. You know when Sayyidah Zaynab came back to Medina, Abdullah bin Ja'far just asked 1 question. Now bearing in mind he knew what Zaynab was. If Zaynab ever wanted to go to the grave of the Prophet, at night time Imam Hassan and Hussein would walk, Amir al-Mu'mineen would make sure nobody sees her. Abdullah bin Ja'far just says 1 thing. He says, is it correct that I heard that when Ali Akbar fell, you ran into the maqtal? He said, what could I have done? I felt embarrassed that my brother was all alone. Do you know what the second thing was? Second thing, she says to him, she says, Abdullah, I don't think I can be the same Zaynab as I was. If you want to let me go, you can let me go. I won't say the words. If you want to let me go, let me go. All I want to do is sit and cry over Hussein. Abdullah says, what are you saying? You're breaking my heart. If you want to cry, you can cry. Abdullah won't disturb you. Can you imagine? That is Abdullah bin Ja'far. That's Abdullah bin Ja'far. Imagine. There's many fadal to him, but look, I'm not going to recite now. No, the atmosphere is such. You're here to cry over Zaynab. Today's Zahra is going to accept your du'as. Today you're here to give condolences to that mother. Where does she go? One day she's in Damascus. One day she's in Medina. One day she's in Mecca. Wherever she is, she's made sure that each one of her people today have somebody to visit. The only person she forgot was herself. There isn't anyone today to visit her grave. This is why they say that from all of the du'as of Zahra, there are 4 different categories of du'a that she does. The last type is when she prayed for herself. You know what du'a she did for herself? Allah, shorten my life so that I can join my father. Look, if only I could recite. One tradition then. There's much to recite about Sayyidah Zaynab. I don't have the hal to now recite because no, you're not ready to listen in that way. You're ready to cry. So let me give you this tradition then. They say that when Amir al-Mu'mineen became Khalifa, He was standing in Masjid al-Kufa, and Imam Hassan comes over. He says, son, I miss my Zaynab, I miss my daughters. Can you go to Medina and bring them? Imam Hassan says, yes, he went to Medina. They say when he got to the place where Bani Hashim would live, he said, oh, daughters of Banu Hashim, your father Ali misses you. All the women started to cry. One woman got up and she says, tell our father, Zaynab misses him more. Says, let's go. All of us, let's go to Kufa. They say that at night, around about Maghrib time, just before night time, Imam Hassan comes with the entire caravan. And the caravan is outside of Kufa. He comes inside. Masjid al-Kufa was there. Amir al-Mu'mineen sees him and he just says one thing, alaykum bil-layl. And then he stops and he says to all of Kufa, he says, tonight, the daughters of the Prophet are coming as your guests. But tonight, no one should come out of their houses. Nobody should come out of their houses because my daughters are coming. Now do you understand who Zaynab is? Now do you understand? What did Imam Hussein give? If you want to see the status, imagine a family whose every single male member has been annihilated and every ashab's male member or the family have been annihilated, children have been killed. Now what happens? In this time where Imam is himself quiet, fourth Imam, Zaynab becomes the head of a family. It's not easy when there's a catastrophe like that to take the entire family forward. Sayyid al-Shahadat didn't know anyone to entrust the entire family to. Even if none of our family members died, if you were to come into a group of people who all of their families have died, is it possible for you to take them from Kufa to Sham like that? Where at every step people are chucking water at you, people are chucking stones at you, people are calling you Baghi, people are calling you Kafir. It's not easy. And that's Zaynab, whose hijab is such that the angels haven't seen hijab like that. Tradition says she would try and hide her face with her hands. She didn't want people to recognize her. She used to hide her face with her hands. Zaynab is the one who taught us how to mourn. The first thing, there may not be riwayat for beating your chest, but there is riwayat beating your face. The first person to beat their face was Zaynab. The minute that she heard Imam Hussein was, look at the tradition and see. Look, brothers, today there's no one to hold you back. They say every time a 4-year-old girl tried to cry, there was a shimmer behind her. If you don't believe me, let me tell you one more thing then. I remember one day I was on a minbar, I won't mention what place. When I got up, there was an old man standing there. He says, the riwayah that you recited was correct. He says, can I come to you tomorrow? I said, come. When he came, he brought me a picture. Who was there? Mohsin Amina Amali was sitting there. There was a white shroud. I said, what's that shroud? He said, that's the shroud of Sakina. I said, did you ever ask him a question? I said, yes. He gave me the picture. I have the picture. If anybody ever comes, I'll show it to you. But there's a question he asked. He said, what did you see on the face of Sakina? You know what he replied? He said that I couldn't believe that to this day, there were 2 things about Sakina that doesn't leave me. He says, what was it? Somehow the white cloth moved and I saw 3 finger marks on her face. He says, but there was one more thing I saw. What was it? Her hair was missing. He says, how Shimmer would grab her by the hair and pull her. You didn't see it, but you're crying like this. Imagine if you saw it. Now imagine Zaynab. No, look at Rabab. 7 steps away she was. She came running to say to Zaynab. She says, what is it? She says, my daughter's a yatima. What happened? He said, this man came and he slapped her on the... Look, if only I could narrate it. Like, I won't say anymore, you won't be able to take it. But you know what they say, when the day Sayyidah Zaynab was to pass away, in fact, 3 days from before, she stopped drinking water. Women came to Abdullah bin Ja'far. They said, look, Zaynab's not drinking any water. Abdullah bin Ja'far himself brings the water. He says, Bibi, why don't you drink water for? She says, Hussein. 3 days before. One tradition says the final day of hers, she says to the women, I can't stand, but take me, stretching me out under the sun. Abdullah bin Ja'far now comes again, says, why? Why do you want to be under the sun for? She says, my brother Hussein was lying there in his body. No, but it's not complete. One more thing I'll tell you. The most painful Zaynab is in the heart of Amir al-Mu'mineen. 2 traditions, that's it. Do dua. When tears come into your eyes, it's because Allah wants to accept your dua. Not everybody's nasib is to cry, believe me. They say when Amir al-Mu'mineen was leaving this world, he gathered all of his children around. He looked up, he couldn't see Hussein anywhere. He says to Imam Hassan, he says, son, go and fetch Hussein. Imam Hassan goes, there was a hujra that he walks inside. You know what the tradition says? When a child cries so much that he cuts all of a sudden, his breathing cuts and he starts choking on his tongue, tradition says Hussein's tongue was out, he was choking. Right? He says, brother, if you're going to cry like this, what's our father going to say? Compose yourself. Both of them go. Amir al-Mu'mineen is lying there. Hassan has tears in his eyes. Imam says, son, this time will pass. Hussein now begins to cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, son, this time will pass. You know what Imam Hussein says? He says, father, one of the reasons I cry for is this. When Rasulullah died, you were there to hug us. You were there to put your hand over our head. When our mother Zahra died, you were there. Father, this is Kufa. You're leaving. Who's going to be here for us? What? Well, Amir al-Mu'mineen said, this time will pass as well. Everyone is saying, Abbas is coming, this time will pass, this time will pass. Finally, he says to all of his companions, leave now. He says, why? He says, Zaynab is coming. Zaynab comes forward, she sees her father, she begins to cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't have it in him to say, this time will pass. Mawla begins to cry as well. As Zaynab is crying, Amir al-Mu'mineen puts his head in the way. Rasulullah put his head on the shoulder of Zahra. At that moment, he whispered something into the air. Whispered something into the air of Sayyidah Zaynab. I looked around everywhere to see what he whispered. One great scholar, he says, look at this particular hadith. Go and look at it yourself. He says, I can't say it. You go and look at it yourself. When I looked at this tradition, you know what the tradition said? Amir al-Mu'mineen whispered something, but that's painful. This is why maybe the Imam would say, Asham, Asham, Asham. You know what he whispered? Let me narrate it to you so you may understand. This is what it was. They say that the most painful moment for Ahlul Bayt was Bazar al-Sham. One bazaar that takes a minute and a half to cross, 23 hours you found Ahlul Bayt was standing there. Yazid was having his breakfast, Zaynab was standing outside. They say she came to the door of the bazaar, she sat down on the ground and she doesn't move. Women were chucking hot water, Zaynab doesn't move. People were chucking stones, Zaynab wasn't moving. Shimr was lashing her, Zaynab wasn't moving. Zaynab is not moving. Imam Sajjad comes forward, says, Aunt, what's happened? Are you startled? Why don't you get up? Why don't you go in? Zaynab just says one thing. She says, son, when my father was leaving this world, he said to me, Zaynab, a time is going to come where they're going to parade you in Bazar al-Sham. Zaynab, at that moment, don't be startled, don't be scared. Wait for me, Zaynab. Ali will come. Take you by the hand and take you in. Zaynab turns around and says, I'm waiting for my father to come so he can take me by the hand and take me in. History doesn't say what happened, but one daughter stands up and says, Assalamu alayka. Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. And she Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam Hussein.
Hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai 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 Sham, hai hai
Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham,
hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham,
hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham, hai hai Zaynab, hai hai Sham.
غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، 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 غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ، نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا۔ کیوں زینب کلثوم کی چنتی ہے ردائے، کیوں زینب کلثوم کی چنتی ہے ردائے، جاؤ ارے لوگوں میرے بھائی کو بلانا، نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا ہے، غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا۔ جس گھر پہ سلامی دیا کرتے تھے پیمبر، جس گھر پہ سلامی دیا کرتے تھے پیمبر، ٹھہرو اے مسلمان وہ وہی گھر نہ جلانا، نہ بھول سکے گا اس استطاعش زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا تو دختر زہرا ہے نواسی ہے نبی کی تو دختر زہرا ہے نواسی ہے نبی کی بازار میں سرگرم یہ تیرا خطبہ سنانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا نیند آئے بھلا کیسے سکینہ کو زمیں پر نیند آئے بھلا کیسے سکینہ کو زمیں پر تو نے ہی سکھایا اسے سینے میں سلانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا نیند آئے بھلا کیسے سکینہ کو زمیں پر نیند آئے بھلا کیسے سکینہ کو زمیں پر تو نے ہی سکھایا اسے سینے پہ سلانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا 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 اے دختر حیدر وہ قیامت کی گری تھی اے دختر حیدر وہ قیامت کی گری تھی سر ننگے تیرا شام کے دربار میں جانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے دختر حیدر وہ قیامت کی گری تھی اے دختر حیدر وہ قیامت کی گری تھی سر ننگے تیرا شام کے دربار میں جانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا تو دختر زہرا ہے نواسی ہے نبی کی سرنم کہ تیرا خطبہ سنانا نہ بھول سکے گا اس حشر زمانہ اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا اے غیرت مریم تیرا بازار میں جانا شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی سینے پہ جو شاہ کے پلی جس کی ابا بن میں جلی جس کی ابا بن میں جلی منہ پر تماچوں کے نشان ہے زینب ہے شام 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 وہ عابد بیمار تھا وہ عابد بیمار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں ہے زینب ہے شام 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 ہے زینب ہے
محمد صلوات
زيارة المخصوص بيبي زينب عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله السلام عليك يا بنت نبي الله السلام عليك يا بنت محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا بنت ولي الله السلام عليك يا بنت علي المرتضى سيد الأوصياء والصديقين السلام عليك يا بنت فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا أخت الحسن والحسين سيدي الشباب بأهل الجنة أجمعين السلام عليك أيتها السيدة الزكية السلام عليك أيتها الداعية الخفية السلام عليك أيتها التقية النقية السلام عليك أيتها الرضية المرضية السلام عليك أيتها العالمة الغير المعلمة السلام عليك أيتها الفهيمة الغير المفهمة السلام عليك أيتها المظلومة السلام عليك أيتها المهمومة السلام عليك أيتها الصديقة السلام عليك أيتها المكروبة السلام عليك أيتها المأسورة السلام عليك أيتها الصاحبة المصيبة العظمى. السلام عليك يا زينب الكبرى ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت رسول الله جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتيه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا
أرحم الراحمين.
Brothers, please be seated for Tabarruk to be served. Thank you.